Hello, hello, hello. So I think this is working. Uh, Hi, can somebody let me know if you can hear me okay, if everything's working properly? I would appreciate it. I don't want to get on here and talk for who knows how long and nobody can hear me. Somebody let me know. Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon. Happy Thursday or Friday, depending on where you are in the world. I'm going to give this just a few seconds or so to let people come on. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me on this Thursday afternoon, Pacific time, anyway. So, hello. I'd love for you guys to say hello as you come on. I know, I don't know when these people came on, but thank you for being here, Sharia and Herlinda and Jody, Madonna, Sharon, Marianne. Hi, Steve. Great, welcome to the live. Hello, Kelly and Barbara. Hi, James. Hi, everybody. So thank you for joining me. So I wanted today, hi, Lindsay, to talk to you about something that in many ways I've talked about quite a bit, I think, in one way or another. But I've had some conversations with people and gotten messages from people probably, I think, more in the last few months or so, and maybe it's because I've been promoting Journey to Wholeness. I don't know, my YouTube channel is growing a little bit. I don't know exactly why, but anyway, I've been hearing from people a little bit more with kind of this fear of doing the work, of acknowledging or recognizing, putting the effort or energy into healing, afraid of what it's going to create in their lives. And sometimes the fear is something very specific around, I'm afraid I'm going to start feeling all the hurt from everything I've experienced, and I'm just going to get really depressed, or I'm not going to be able to go on. That's actually a fairly common fear, where I feel like I'm afraid I'm going to get overwhelmed with all the feeling, and then I'm not going to be able to function. Those are pretty common fears that a lot of people have, specifically as it relates, especially to working on childhood trauma. But I've also heard from a lot of people that, and this is just kind of a general thing that's talked about quite often, is this, I don't know that they would identify it as a fear, but really this fear, this avoidance, this desire to bypass dealing with anything difficult or thinking about anything difficult, because then instead of being all positive, you're all negative. Instead of having a high vibration, you're in a low vibration. Instead of focusing on all the good and the gratitude and the blessings, you're dwelling in the negative, right? Can I get a show of hands if you've heard that, or maybe even said it to yourself? Like, I know it's part of a way of getting through our lives. Like, no, I don't want to dwell on this negative stuff. I want to feel positive. I want to focus on the good. I want to find the blessing in that thing, whatever that is. That's not necessarily wholly a bad, or even, well, it's certainly not wholly a bad thing. I was going to say, I'm not even sure it's necessarily wholly an unhealthy thing, but unless you've actually done the work on healing, I would actually say that it probably is an unhealthy thing. Of course, there could be some exceptions to that. But right, can you can relate to that? Yeah, thanks you guys for sharing that. It's a really significant thing, and part of that comes from just the way that we are raised. We're told, don't cry, just go out there and make a new friend, or just go out there and keep yourself busy, or whatever. You don't want to just sit and cry about it. That doesn't do anybody any good. So we get these messages from the time we are toddlers, even in the healthiest of homes, we get it everywhere, no matter where we look. That's kind of the message. But of course, there are other things that we experience and read and hear throughout our lives that reinforce that idea. So I wanted today to talk more specifically about how to look at acknowledging that we've been wounded and opening up to healing that wound as it relates to people that have a fear of going from being a positive person to a negative person or kind of getting into that low vibration. So, again, a lot of what I'm going to say here is stuff that you've heard me say before in one way or another, but I'm going to talk about it at least partially a little bit differently for those people who like follow the law of attraction. If you've seen The Secret, then you are likely one of those people. If you try to follow it, you're likely one of those people who wants to only think positive things, like only think about the good things that you're manifesting in your life. You don't want to think about anything negative because it will only bring more negative to you. So, and that's a literal fear that a lot of people have. Like it's not just an idea, it's not just a thought that they have, like, oh, I don't want that to happen. It actually creates this physiological response which connects to your survival mechanism that says, no, 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 and it causes you to want to run the other way. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Benji, always in search of balance between the negative and positive. And that is kind of what being a healthy human being, I think, is, because nothing is ever all positive and nothing is always ever all negative. But the reality is that positive and negative, if we're going to refer to it that way, positive and negative exists. It's part of this planet. It's part of being human. It's part of existing. Actually, it's certainly part of being in relationship with anybody. So being healthy is creating the resources within yourself and the understanding within yourself to be able to kind of navigate that. And when you're pulled too far in one direction, because there is such a thing as denial or avoidance or bypassing in terms of positivity, which is not a healthy thing. So being human, being healthy is about finding your way back to the center. Doesn't mean that you stay in the center all the time. It means that you find your own ability, intuitive, natural ability to, no matter which side you go on, to kind of come back to that balance and to that healthy place. So that's what we're talking about today. People saying don't dwell on the negative makes me feel like a burden. And at the same time, it hurts. Yeah, it does hurt. It absolutely hurts because it's incredibly dismissive and minimizing. And the reality is they may not intend for it to be that way. They may actually think that they're helping you by saying that, which is part of the difficulty. But it feels incredibly dismissive. And that feels hurtful, especially when it's somebody that you feel like should be supportive of you, or you would like them to be supportive of you. And the reality is that in the work that I do with people, even just doing these videos, so much of the hurt that people experience isn't just from a specific like abuse experience, it's from all those other things or experiences that we have with other people when we try to share or show something. Don't be a victim. Yes. Oh my goodness. That just reminded me of, I don't remember the exact experience, but I remember somebody saying one time, or I've heard it quite a few times, but one time in particular, somebody said, I'm not going to play a victim. And it did not sit well with me. I'll just kind of put it that way. But yeah, we had a lively conversation about that. But that really, it does piss me off. I will be completely honest with you. When I hear it, just something inside of me just like gets very activated because I feel very protective of struggle, of the reality of humans struggling, and then suggesting that somebody is playing a victim or being a victim just doesn't sit very well with me. But that that specific kind of thing is often, sometimes it can actually be well intentioned, but it comes from complete ignorance. Um, and often does it, it's not just about coming from ignorance. Oftentimes it actually comes from their way of trying to run from anything that makes them uncomfortable. And often what makes them uncomfortable is that their own stuff is triggered, that they don't want to feel like a victim. They don't want to be perceived as a victim. They don't want to be perceived as weak. They want to be seen as somebody who has their shit together or isn't bothered by that anymore, is strong and didn't struggle with that and they just let that go or whatever. But it is hard. And so that's part of the reason that I want to talk about this today, because while my focus generally is always about impact and healing from childhood abuse, I recognize that we are all wounded, and I want everybody to understand that so that they can do their own healing, because we are the walking wounded. But I also want people that maybe have childhood trauma or dysfunction in their life, who have done these other things in order to cope and move on with their lives, like be in denial, um, be positive, find the blessing in it, do all these things to manage their symptoms and cope that look really positive on the outside. I want those people to recognize that when they're struggling, when they're on their own and they're feeling unworthy, or they're finding themselves struggling with the same things over again, addiction or unhealthy relationships, or just feeling like they're missing out on something in their life, even if they think their childhood stuff has nothing to do with anything, wanting them to understand that maybe they've done things in order to get past it, but maybe instead of actually helping you really heal and get past it, it's only created more difficulty for you. So thank you everybody for being here. Keep the comments coming. I do want to go ahead and get into some of the things that I wanted to share, so that when this is over, I can let people know how much of the first part is the information before I go on to some Q&A. So I will try to get to all of these comments and certainly keep them coming. So I'll try to address the rest of everything else that you guys are sharing here at the end. So thank you for being here, and take some notes as I'm writing. If you're not putting stuff in the chat right now, make some little notes and come back when we're at the end here. So, okay. So I mentioned already, like, some of the things that I've heard, right? That people are kind of afraid they're going to get into this really difficult place and not be able to get out, or the idea that that's going to take me into this negative vibration or into this negative headspace. And that's never helpful, because we need to stay positive. Okay. So I've made some notes because I want to make sure that I cover everything that's come to mind about this. So firstly, when you have been wounded in some way, and again, we are all wounded. I am not somebody who believes that we've all experienced trauma. I think that's not accurate. And I think it really can create a situation where it can reinforce denial for a lot of people who are adamant and are afraid of acknowledging trauma. But it also lumps everything into any wounding being traumatic, and it's not. And I think it can be damaging and destructive to lump all wounding into a trauma experience. And I know some people say big T trauma, little t trauma. Yeah, I don't really necessarily see it that way. If it's trauma, it's trauma. Um, but anyway, so when we, for whatever reason, when we are in denial or unwilling to acknowledge the wounding that we've experienced, and let's say you've gone through this really intense, maybe it's even a spiritual practice of connecting to yourself and your, I don't know, your spirit guides, or just this really like law of attraction community, or just really focused on doing everything that's going to raise your vibration. And I'm not. It's really not my desire, nor is it my intention um, to suggest that those things are bad. That's not at all what I'm trying to suggest. I'm just wanting to make it very clear. Again, I'm saying this from a person who has experience as a trauma therapist, working with survivors of abuse for nearly 20 years at this point. Um, I'm not suggesting that all of that is bad. I'm not. However, it is very often used as a way of denying or bypassing the wounding. So when you have been wounded and you're not recognizing it, whatever that might look like, you're moving beyond it, you're putting it behind you, you're actually in full denial about it, whatever it is. You go on with your life. Maybe your life looks really great. Maybe you even feel really great much of the time, but there are times when you don't. So if you are somebody who uses gratitude, or are thinking positive thoughts all the time, and like manifesting from this place of always future forward, and just focusing on all the things you want to bring into your life. If you've got this wound that has not yet healed, then all this other stuff that you're doing with partial energy. And it's partial energy because much of your energy, your literal energy, emotional and physical, is used on an unconscious level. It's used to keep all this stuff at bay, under the surface, hidden in a box on a shelf somewhere. So all this energy that you're putting into all this other stuff is not your full free-flowing energy, because there's all this energy. So if you've watched my videos or you've heard me talk about the Jack in the Box analogy, this is kind of what I'm talking about here. So because it's literally like part of your energy has to keep all this over here, but you don't really recognize it because you're just over here looking at all this other stuff because you don't want to see any of this. So you don't recognize that part of your energy is over here. So you're blocking a flow, a free, beautiful flow of energy that's available to you, because it gets caught up because it's still moving through you, right? If you just think about having your hands out and it's moving from fingertip to fingertip, well, if your hand is holding all this at bay over here, it's not free flowing, right? Okay, so all this positive stuff that you're bringing in kind of gets stuck. It doesn't it doesn't move completely through you. And another way that you may have heard me talk about this is that when you have a core belief that's different than all the stuff that you're bringing in, it doesn't fully integrate because there's a block that's there. Okay. So when you think that you're doing all these positive things, and they may be positive and they may make you feel better in a lot of ways, and I don't want to discount that, but it's making you feel better only to a certain degree because the energy doesn't get to move fully through you. So that's probably not the best way that I could describe it, but that's the best way that's coming to me in this moment. So if your desire, by focusing on the positive, by finding the blessing or the gratitude in everything, by being grateful for every difficult experience you've had, by only focusing on the positive, you're not acknowledging the totality of your experience. So, how do you then stay kind of in that, or how is it possible to stay in that more kind of positive place while acknowledging and or honoring the difficult stuff? So this is what I would like people to think about. Keeping in mind that if you are kind of in denial or avoiding this other stuff, that it's not actually happening the way that you think it is anyway. But when you are able, from a conscious place, able to say, okay, I get that there are some things in my life that I've experienced, and maybe it's childhood stuff, maybe it's something that happened a year ago, but I recognize that there is something that was painful. I recognize that there was something that actually had a pretty big impact on my life or made me feel a certain way, or I find myself thinking about whenever this comes up. When you're denying it, you're not actually like dissipating all of that energy. You're actually giving it more energy because you're having to push it aside. So when you are in a conscious place and you're saying, okay, let's figure this out. What is this? Then you are opening this channel, so to speak, over here for this stuff that you've been keeping at bay to move through you, to move that energy. So if you are an energy person, if you're just holding it back, it's like a dam. It's like you're trying to hold back all this stuff, but you can only do that up to a point. And it builds, right? That pressure just builds and builds and builds. So much of your energy is about holding it back. When you make a conscious intention and have support to acknowledge and honor that wounding, then it opens the door for the healing to happen, for it to have the opportunity to run. Like I just had this visual of, I don't agree with this. Let me first say that, of like the running of the bulls thing. Like you're holding the bulls back and they just get more frustrated and more frustrated, right? Because they're being held back. And then when the gate opens, they go running and they're just running through the street, right? So when you make the conscious, intentional choice to look at what is this, then you are opening that up and releasing that energy because it's going to move through, and you're taking back your energy that you've been using holding this at bay. So not only do you get your own energy back to use fully, but the energy of everything you've been holding back is able to move through. Now, obviously, it's not that simple, and it doesn't just automatically happen and, oh, okay, now I'm healed. No, it doesn't work that way, and I'm certainly not suggesting that it is. But that is the first step of it not having to be such a negative thing. Because when you open that door for that energy to move through and you get to hold on to your own energy, you get the, I'm sorry, I'm not thinking of the word I'm looking for, but you get the ability to stand fully and completely in your own energy, and you're conscious of how you get to use that energy. Then when you're doing all these other things, you're doing it fully and completely. So when you think about, oh, I'm going to go to that negative place, I want to think about all these negative things, it's not about that. Healing isn't really about that, at least not as far as I'm concerned. Healing is about understanding that we've been affected by something. We have to understand what it is that we've been affected by, how it's affected us. That doesn't have to take a ton of work. And in that, then it opens the door for everything else to happen. So if you are somebody that fears getting into that really negative place, if you think about it that way, then you're actually gaining more of your own power back by doing that. And I'm not just coming up with a way to talk about it so it might make sense to you. I'm actually trying to describe the reality of how we heal physiologically, emotionally, psychologically, energetically. That is the healing. And in that moment when we open that door and the balls run through, that is healing. Because when you think about that release of the pressure, that by itself is healing. And in fact, that itself is the healing that some people might experience when they like share something for the first time and they say, oh my God, that was such a healing thing and I've healed that. That is a piece of healing. Now there's more that you need to do. There's more physiologically, emotionally that needs to happen likely, but that is a piece of the healing. It is a piece that gets you, 100 steps up or whatever, up that mountain. So we need that. That is a part of the healing, but it is not the totality of the healing. So when you think about going back to that stuff being negative, it's actually not going to a negative place. It's going to a place of honoring what is already existing within you. Just because you're in denial about it, just because you're pretending it doesn't affect you, doesn't make it so. I wish that it did. I truly do. But it doesn't. And when you think that it should, you've been told that it will, and then you keep struggling, you blame yourself. You feel like there's something wrong with you. And that's why I keep talking about this. So we can see that as an empowering, powerful, conscious choice to release all that you've been holding at bay. And when I talk about honoring, and this is part of the energetic thing that happens, the actual positive energetic thing that happens when you honor. So part of the honoring is acknowledging and validating. And a big piece of the honoring is self-compassion. I'm just making a note of this real quick. um, sorry, don't want to forget how I just said that. So the honoring is those things, right? If you think about having a cut on your arm, if you just tell yourself, oh, I can't, if I actually wash that and clean it and put ointment on it and put a Band-Aid on it, then I'm just feeding into that negativity that it hurts. Like that's may seem like an extreme example, but that's kind of the same thinking when it comes to emotional wounding. No, I'm not going to think about the fact that it hurts because I don't want it to hurt, and I'm just going to focus on I have one good arm left. Or I'm just going to focus on the fact that at least I didn't lose my arm. Like, yeah, that's good to think about. But if that wound needs some sort of attention, it's just going to get worse and worse, right? It's going to affect your ability to use your arm. So if we honor, I'm going to use this as an example of honoring. I wouldn't necessarily refer to physical wounds as needing to be honored because we're pretty good at paying attention to physical wounds. But the honoring in this example would be, oh, wow, I've got a pretty big cut on my arm. Yeah, I guess I need to take care of that so it doesn't get infected. I need to take care of that so it doesn't get worse and it hurts more, or it affects my ability to use it, or get infected and give me sepsis or whatever it might get to. I don't know. I'm not a medical professional. Or cause you to lose your arm ultimately. So you pay attention, right? Like, oh, okay, there's a wound. Let me go wash it off. So you go and wash it off. Maybe you get some Neosporin or something and you put some Neosporin on there and you're going to bandage it, right? And then you're probably going to go back the next day and do it again. Maybe you don't need to do all those steps again, but you're going to pay attention to it, right? Of course you are, because that's what we do. But when it comes to emotional wounding, we think of it very differently. And the reality is that while a physical wound could cause you to eventually maybe lose your arm, or in extreme cases, maybe lose your life, the reality is that emotional wounding from childhood, especially traumatic wounding or incredibly chaotic or dysfunctional wounding, literally can lead to death because it can lead to suicidal thoughts and desires. It can also lead to, if you're familiar with the ACEs test, it can lead to chronic physical conditions like heart disease and gastrointestinal problems. So when we can look at that wound and acknowledge it and give it the care that it needs, that is the honoring. That's what I mean by honoring. Like if you've got a cut and you bandage it up, or you sprain your wrist or something, like you're not going to keep using your wrist if you sprain it, right? You're going to put it in a sling or whatever, and you're going to not use it. You're going to have some compassion for the fact that it hurts and it needs time to heal. When we have an emotional wound and we're ignoring it, then that negative energy is still there. When we can honor it, we are sending positive energy. Literally, we are sending our own positive energy and therefore letting the universe know that we want to send positive energy to this wound. When we honor it, we're acknowledging it. We're saying, yes, there's a wound. We can validate it. And an emotional example would be, we say, yes, of course that's going to have an impact on how you feel about yourself, or of course it's going to have an impact on how you feel about relationships and trust, of course it makes sense. Of course you're going to struggle with feeling abandoned if your parent was never around, whatever it is. Just like you're going to say, if you've got this bandaged arm and you bump it again, instead of telling yourself, stop being a baby, you're going to say, of course that hurts. Wow, I need to be a little bit more careful, right? So you're sending positive energy by honoring that. When you do it from an intentional, self-compassionate place, when you do it from an open place of saying, yes, I see you, I understand, maybe even, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we experienced that. You're sending that positive love, right? If somebody, like let's say you've got that bandaged arm and somebody that you care about says to you, oh, I'm really sorry that to see that that is so painful for you. Can I do anything to help? That's not adding negative energy, right? No, that's actually, they're sending loving energy and that feels good, right? It's the same thing when we do it to ourselves. If that person says, oh my God, you're such an idiot. I can't believe you hurt yourself like that. Get over it already. Like if somebody says that to you, it's going to feel like shit, right? And you're going to think, what the hell is wrong with this person? And then you're going to maybe even feel embarrassed or ashamed that you hurt yourself and you're going to want to try to hide it. But if somebody responds in a positive way, you're going to absorb that loving energy. The same thing is true when we, within ourselves, acknowledge, validate, and have self-compassion for our own emotional wounding. That is the honoring that I am talking about. So the idea that we only get into this negative space is actually not true. Now, my experience and expertise is not in metaphysics. I will fully, completely own that. My guess is most of the people, if you are somebody who is very into that, my guess is most of the people that you listen to may not be experts in that area either. But even if that is true, my guess is that those experts that you're listening to are not necessarily experts in psychology or in understanding childhood traumatic impact long term. So not that they don't have something to offer, absolutely. And that's why I'm talking about this in all these different ways to help people understand. Again, there are different pieces there are different tools out there for healing, but each one serves a purpose. You can't build a house with one tool, right? You can't. You can't build anything really with one tool. We need lots of different tools in order to heal. We need even different, I'm just thinking about building a house. We even need different, I can't think of the word in house building that this is, but like we need different types of contractors, right? We need electricians and plumbers and all of that stuff. The same is true. So when you see these different things out there about this is how you heal trauma, or this is how you heal emotional blocks or whatever, they are tools to healing. So even for me as a trauma therapist, a big part of what I use to help people understand is from a cognitive behavioral approach. But that is not the only thing that I use. That is the biggest piece in understanding all of the different pieces that we need to be able to understand. But we incorporate mindfulness, we incorporate energy, we incorporate breath, we incorporate all the kinds of body types of things to help release it. recognize and release within our bodies. So there are all these different pieces that we do. But coming back, because I know I can go off sometimes, coming back to being able to see this not as I'm either going to be positive or I'm going to get into this negative place. So hopefully what I've shared already helps you hopefully see it, that it's not either or, that it actually can be positive energy, high vibrational energy when we're sending love, our own love. And when we have support, then obviously it's their love too. But when we're sending love to that space. Also, using your voice, being witnessed, those are positive energetic experiences that we get to have as well. And using your voice by speaking, that's part of the opening the door so the bulls can run. When you're using your voice, that is the road that they get to run out on, so to speak. You're using your voice to speak all of that, to release all of that energy that you've been holding at bay. And when you're holding this door closed, and remember I was talking about that flow of energy is blocked. When you open that door, all these other things that you're doing to be kind of positive, whatever that might look like, you've opened the door so that this flow of energy can actually move through completely. It's not blocked unconsciously over here. I also want to say that, yes, particularly if you're looking at significant childhood wounding, it's scary. It's often sad. There's sadness that comes up. There's hurt that comes up. There's fear that comes up. There are tears often that come up. But if you look at how you have been living your life, my guess is that you've been experiencing those same feelings anyway. You may not have connected it to this other stuff, but there are things in your current life that make you feel sad or hurt or betrayed or tearful. And the reality is that if you've got this other stuff over here, when it comes up for you in your recent adult life, what you're feeling isn't just about what's happened in those moments. Because when you have unhealed stuff over here, especially if it's not even been acknowledged yet, then what you're feeling in your current life is connecting to those same feelings from years ago. So think about it, in your current adult life, you have moments when you doubt yourself. You have moments when you have cried. You have moments when you have felt devastated because a relationship is unhealthy. It's not working. You feel betrayed in a relationship or whatever it may be. You feel hurt at times. You feel sad at times. Grief creeps up for one reason or another. So you're still feeling all of those same things. You just don't understand why you're feeling it at the intensity, to the degree that you're feeling it. And you're then also not doing the work to heal what is creating the intensity of that feeling in your current life. So is it challenging? Yes. But my guess is, especially if you've got a lot of that childhood stuff, there are times that your life is probably pretty challenging now. There are times that you're finding yourself struggle in some way pretty significantly, here or there at least. Maybe it only shows up in certain ways. But my guess is that there is some way that you find yourself struggling repeatedly, whether it's daily or weekly or on occasion, but there's something that triggers that deep internal struggle where you find that you're really doubting yourself or beating yourself up in some way. And that causes you to put all your energy again to pushing all of this aside. So any energy that you might have to feel better, to be positive, again, it's blocked and you don't have the full capacity of your energy that should be available to you. Um, okay, I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. So, whew, speaking of energy, I've got lots of energy. I can feel it. I don't. Many of you may not know that I am a Reiki practitioner as well, third degree Reiki practitioner. And before I came on and did this video, I did a little meditation and just opened to some of that Reiki energy, and I am definitely feeling it in my body. So, whew, all right. So let me go up here a little bit. So if you've got questions, comments, it's okay if you disagree with me. You might have a different kind of opinion or experience. I want you to share it with me. Let me know. And it's okay if we disagree, and you might open my eyes or help me talk about something in a way that maybe I'm missing. So please, you don't have to agree with me here. Okay. Yeah, going back to that idea of people telling you to just kind of get over it doesn't feel good. Definitely not just you, Jody. I hear myself use this statement too, not just about myself, but others. Yeah. And that is the coping. And that's part of this difficulty. And when I talk about you cannot heal what you deny is wounded, it's that denial. It's that way of kind of bypassing, moving around what is really going on. And we are taught, like that whole idea, this is something we say in the US anyway. I don't, especially in the South, I don't know if other people say it or not, but like pick yourself up by your bootstraps. That's a saying that's been around forever. And the idea is you just suck it up basically and just move on with your life. And like I said, I think that there's been a time when that's been kind of well intentioned, like just don't feel bad. It's not good to feel bad. Just move on. But the reality is that, and I think that over time this has become more aware. I think there was a time even in the mental health field that might have been seen as the way to handle stuff. But fortunately, over time, people are beginning to see that is not the case. And really, even in the field of trauma, quite often it's been about treating symptoms, not necessarily healing. So a lot of therapists, and I would say this is probably going back a little bit, and not necessarily therapists, but like the mental health field overall, was more kind of about treating symptoms. And even like if you think about medication, when somebody's depressed, right? It's about treating the symptoms so they feel better, not actually dealing with why they're depressed in the first place. But it's this whole idea of thinking that we're only creating more difficulty if we look at that thing. So like thinking, like if you've got a wound on your arm, it's the mentality that just ignore it and it'll get better. Well, I think most of us know that if we just ignore a pretty deep cut in our arm, it isn't just going to get better. It's going to get worse. And hopefully my husband isn't going to get mad at me for sharing this. But my husband stepped on a nail and it went through his shoe. And anyway, he handled it, like he actually did attend to it, and he thought that he got it all out. But after a while, he noticed it kept hurting. He ended up going to the podiatrist. That doctor thought he pulled it all out. Eventually, it started hurting again, meaning that there was still something there. So he even was kind of paying attention to it, although he wouldn't quite a few weeks or months in between actually deciding to do something about it. But eventually, I don't know, a year and a half later, recognizing that there was still a piece of his shoe stuck in his foot. um, and once he got that out, now everything is much better. So we can't ignore it. And that's part of why I have this channel and why I talk about this stuff. I am wanting everybody to recognize that we are all wounded. And this is why I talk about it. We are all wounded, whether we recognize it or not. And this is where I think talking about everything being traumatic, I think is not appropriate and not helpful. But we are all wounded. Maybe a fairly small wound, maybe a really incredible gaping wound. But we are all wounded, and we need to be able, all of us, we need to be able to understand what it is that has left us wounded so that we can then do the work to do the healing. Yes, small, sharing in smaller spaces, even one-on-one, is almost always the best way to start. Um, I think some people confuse empowerment and taking responsibility for healing with denying and shutting up and dissociation and not allowing vulnerability. I'm not quite sure if I'm understanding this. Um, I think there certainly could be some confusion with that. And taking responsibility and healing is certainly vulnerable as well. Hard for me to share with one of my friends from church. She assumes it's me dwelling on my feelings. That is such a common thing. I think we all have somebody, if not multiple people in our lives who believe that. Um, and again, they may be well-meaning when they say it, but obviously it doesn't feel good when they say it. And just because they're well-meaning certainly doesn't mean they're right. Um, but that is a difficult experience to have, which again is why I talk about this stuff all the time and in different ways, because I want people to understand that connecting to our feelings and expressing our feelings is not weakness, it's human. That it's not dwelling, it's not a bad or negative thing. It's an important part of honoring our humanness. And so that we can fully, in a very healthy way, show up for ourselves and others in our lives. Because if we're not honoring feelings and struggles and all of that, then I guarantee you we are not showing up fully, authentically, in a healthy way in our lives and with others. That I feel pretty confident I can say. That might piss a lot of people off, but I feel, I'm just thinking, are there any caveats to that? And maybe there is, but I'm pretty sure that I can almost guarantee that. Hi, Wendy. Yeah, it's not just the past. It is being hurt over and over again when somebody does something or says something that is kind of dismissive. Or when there's something that goes on, like if you've got some wounding with a family member and you have to see that family member all the time, it's going to keep coming up. It's not just in the past. Thank you, Benji. I keep trying to find new ways to talk about this so I can reach people that are just like not able to hear it in certain ways. Any tips on healing severe neglect, BPD, bipolar disorder? Yeah. So first of all, I don't know, Marion, if you've heard me say this or not, but borderline personality disorder, I know I've talked about this. So my training, like most all of my clinical training is, especially postgraduate, has been trauma related. There's certainly been some other trainings along the way, but the majority of my training has been in trauma. In my work, the majority by far of my clients I've worked with are childhood sexual abuse survivors, actually, and they are the majority by far of the people who are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So From my perspective, I don't like labels, first of all. I definitely don't like diagnosing people. And I definitely don't like diagnosing people with personality disorders. Like how everybody and their brother is talking about everybody being narcissistic. It's driving me crazy. Not just because somebody's an asshole doesn't mean that they're narcissistic. Just because somebody's abusive does not necessarily mean that they're narcissistic. Now, does narcissistic personality disorder exist? Maybe, but it certainly doesn't mean that everybody is a narcissist because they're an asshole. Or treat somebody badly, but that's kind of how it's out there right now. I think the same thing is true for borderline personality disorder. It's no coincidence that the majority of people who are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder have a history of childhood sexual abuse. The impact of childhood sexual abuse is deep. It is broad. It affects every area of a person's life. When you don't really understand what that actually means, both as a friend and certainly as a therapist, it's incredibly challenging to be with and stay with people that push you away one moment because they're terrified and then desperately want you near them 2 seconds later. That is incredibly challenging as a human, whether you're a therapist or you're not. That's hard. It's hard work. It's challenging. It's hard. It is. I will fully acknowledge it is hard. But when you recognize why that happens, and you can create boundaries, and for yourself, for them, then it doesn't have the same level of impact on you as a professional as it does otherwise. And this is part of the reason why I also say it's important to work with somebody who has experience and understanding in working with survivors, working with survivors of childhood trauma, because hopefully they understand that. And they view those like characteristics of borderline personality disorder, they view those as symptoms of being a survivor and not as a personality disorder. Because that is the reality. I would never would I have ever diagnosed somebody with borderline personality disorder. I just wouldn't have done it. One, because I don't believe that it's an actual warranted diagnosis, nor would I want to put that label on somebody, because when somebody is given that diagnosis, it's kind of, it's incredibly damaging, I believe. So any tips? Work with somebody who really understands it. And I don't say that in a dismissive way at all, but that is honestly the best advice that I can give you. Because severe neglect is going to bring up all kinds of attachment and abandonment stuff. It's going to bring up a lot. And we cannot heal that on our own. Like, especially if you think about neglect, right? You think about what neglect is, and there have been, like, I think most of the mental health field, especially trauma field, is acknowledging that neglect, especially pretty significant neglect, can actually create as much long-term damage, if not more, than childhood sexual abuse. And in some ways, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, but I think that there are some nuances to that. But if you think about childhood neglect, your needs are not being met, your emotional needs are not being met, possibly your physical needs are not being met, your needs of safety are not being met. If your emotional needs are not being met, then you don't feel safe. Now, obviously, you might not consciously think that you don't feel safe, but that is inherently what's going to happen. The only way that you can heal attachment wounding is by being in a healthy relationship. I fully believe that. You might hear something different from somebody else, but that is my opinion. That is my perspective. That is my experience, which is part of the reason why I say we cannot do this on our own. Because when you have been sexually abused as a child, you're going to have trust issues, you're going to have relationship issues, and you're going to fear abandonment, even if it's not at all related to neglect. And it's going to happen for other reasons. So you need somebody who really understands it to be in relationship with, who can help navigate all those really difficult pieces that are bound to come up when you've had that, or you have those symptoms of borderline personality disorder. And again, I don't believe in borderline personality disorder as a true diagnosis. I've worked with a lot of people over the years, there is absolutely no doubt, who would check off a lot of those boxes without any doubt. In fact, I would say probably the majority of people that I've worked with, without a doubt, check off many, many of those boxes. But again, I view those symptoms as symptoms. I view those criteria that you would check off to give a diagnosis as symptoms related to being abused or neglected as a child, of experiencing significant childhood wounding or trauma. So in that situation, you absolutely need a qualified, well-experienced person to help you through that. And again, my first suggestion would be a rape crisis center, at least to start with, because they get very specialized training that a lot of people in private practice may not ever get. Now they may, there's a lot of good people in private practice without a doubt who are very well trained and all of that. But in rape crisis centers, that's what they do. That's all they do. They work with survivors of sexual trauma. So definitely start there. Yeah, when we are trying to cope with something, and the reality is when most of us cope, especially if we haven't really been able to let go of old unhealthy ways of coping, we're going to go back to those old unhealthy ways of coping in our current life as well, because that's just an automatic thing. Our coping mechanisms, generally speaking, are automatic. We don't think about it, we just do it. We've learned to do that. As we learn and grow and heal, we become more conscious of what we're doing to cope. We make choices to cope in different ways. So yes, I would say that there's a good chance that you're relying on older ways of coping with the death of your, I don't know if you said that was your mother. Sorry, I lost it. Your birth mother. So yeah, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes up with that. It's not just like grief of a birth mother. There's going to be a whole lot of stuff around childhood stuff that's going to come up with that. So please get the support that you deserve. I'm sorry, Marion, I'm not really understanding this question, where you say, but have no energy and capacity to give back love and stability. How to not give up on yourself. The not giving up on yourself, that is hard. And this is another one of the reasons why I say we can't do this on our own, because part of the role of having that professional walk this journey with you is that they don't let you give up on yourself, that they remind you of all the progress that you have made, all the reasons to not give up. They hold on to that hope. They see that summit even when you're not able to. That honestly is the most significant thing I would say about how to not give up on yourself. And I think you guys know that I'm not saying this. I'm not trying to get everybody to work with me. I don't even have any openings right now. I have none. So I'm not trying to get people to work with me. This isn't about working with me. This is about getting the help that you deserve, that you need, that we all need to get through this. We cannot do this on our own. And when it comes to significant wounding, we need a qualified, trained professional. And the reality is, and this could be different in different countries, but I know in the US, in order to be in private practice as a therapist, you have to be clinically licensed, independently clinically licensed. So, and the licensing is different and it's confusing. And maybe one day I'll do a video just on trying to understand that. But I don't even fully understand it because every state is a little different. So I could never be, have a complete tutorial, so to speak, on that. But um, that's how you're going to know. Now, there are a lot of people who have been therapists, and this is where I'm at now. There are a lot of people who are therapists and even still doing clinical therapy who are also coaches. So in that case, if that person's got lots of experience working with trauma survivors, then that might be a good person. If you feel like it's a good fit, you feel like they know what they're talking about, then absolutely. And that's what I do now. I have been a clinical therapist. I was independently licensed. I had my own practice, lots of years of experience being a therapist. I had supervision, all of that. And now I no longer do therapy. I do mentoring because there are certain there are certain levels of struggle that I am not able to work with as a mentor versus what I could have done as a therapist. So not just somebody who says, I can heal your trauma. That's please do not go to that person. There's a course floating around out there somewhere by somebody who said that she had complex post-traumatic stress disorder and she healed herself. I don't remember what it is, I don't know, by doing a particular thing, and she was healed in a matter of weeks or something. I don't remember exactly what it is. But that doesn't happen. Maybe she felt a lot better. I don't know afterwards, but inevitably it's going to come back, and nobody can heal anything. Nobody can heal emotional wounding. Like the full depth and breadth of what it means to heal emotional wounding in a course. I have a course. It's a 6-lesson course. I think it's great, but it is not going to heal you. It's not going to heal you. Even if you have the course and you're in the group that I'm doing right now with it, which you could do if you want to, it's not too late to sign up. But I can tell you that even though I'm in there and I'm doing the live Q&As and I'm participating and I'm answering questions and all of that, doing that course inside this 3-month group isn't going to heal you. Is it going to help you in your healing? Yes, I do believe that. I can't guarantee it, but yes, I believe it will. Is it going to give you lots of tools to feel better? Yes. Are you going to have days when you feel really great and proud of yourself and you can see yourself at the top of that summit? I absolutely hope so, and I believe that that can be true. But when we are done with these 3 months, you're going to need more. I think my retreats are incredibly healing. I think they're incredibly powerful. I think they provide something that you cannot get in any other type of situation or circumstance. Incredibly healing. We do all kinds of stuff. We focus on body and mind and voice, and we incorporate it all. I even do energy healing. I do Reiki. But you're going to need a whole lot more beyond our week together. It's going to help you. It's going to take you much further up that mountain, but it's not going to take you to the summit. It can't. It's impossible for that to happen. So there are no quick fixes. There are no single methods to get you to that summit. It's just not possible. We have to incorporate everything. And as long as you are a thinking human being, it has to incorporate the cognitive as well as the emotional, as well as the physiological aspect of healing. It all has to come together. Um, Kim says, so when you're using energy to keep everything together in denial, and then life presents too much, everything pours out at once and is overwhelming. This is just an observation trying to relate. So, Kim, thanks for this question. I think it depends on where you're at in your life and what that thing is. So for some people, if something significant happens and you are really adept at using these coping mechanisms of pushing things aside, or maybe even engaging in really unhealthy coping mechanisms like addiction or self-harm or something like that, then you may be able to add another bowl, so to speak, over here. But there are times, and this is often when somebody will say, okay, I need to go get help. There are times, particularly depending on what it might be, that it can just be too much and it overflows and you just feel completely overwhelmed. Now, even if that is the case, which isn't necessarily always, but when that does happen and somebody says, okay, I need help, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden, until you've been able to heal everything, you're constantly flooded. It's not like these bulls are going to be running around and you have to run from them until everything is healed. It just means that, okay, the gate has opened and maybe there's just too much pressure and you can't put it all back here again. So this is when I need to go and get the support that I need. So I hope that makes sense. If not, add another comment and I will come back to that. Gee, thank you. That really means a lot to me. I appreciate you saying that. I'm gonna try to take that in and trust that you really feel that way, because it is something that I have to work on myself. But I do appreciate you saying this. And when I first came across The Secret, it was because I had clients at the time. This was when I was actually very new in private practice. I had clients at the time. I think it was an Oprah book club book, or she talked about it or something. But I had clients. I think like two or three different clients come in and talk about it. And I thought, okay, I don't know what they're talking about, but what they were saying wasn't quite, like I was like, I don't know about that. So I decided to get the book. I didn't actually read the whole book. I read part of it, but then I watched that film about it. And it did. It kind of just, I felt like it was really kind of missing some things. And this is also similar to the video that I did not too long ago on the missing piece of the documentary on Netflix called Heal. I kind of talked about this a little bit there as well, but thank you. I really appreciate your thoughts about that. Sharia, I'm sorry that this is happening, that everybody around you is kind of not supporting you. And the reality is that I've worked with so many people over the years that the reality is I am the only person who is actually supportive of them and their process. Now, over time, they may start connecting with other people who, in fact, they typically do start connecting with other people who support them. But so many times when somebody has first started this process, I or their therapist, if I hear from them in another way, their therapist is often the only person who they feel supported by. And while that sucks, and it would be nice if you had people in your life that supported you, that is the reality. And you can still heal when that is the case. But that makes it even more important to have somebody that can help you in this process. Um, Thank you, Lenny. I appreciate that. And a book has been on the shelf, so to speak, for a while, but I feel like I can express myself much more better in video than in written form, and so I realize that's maybe a block that I need to be able to get through. But thank you, Jody. I have to say that just recently I've been thinking about the book again. so, so maybe this is a message, like thinking about how the universe or the energy whole thing works, manifesting thing works. Yeah, I will take this in. Yeah. It's amazing. There's the original wound that we experience, and then the things that we say to ourselves reinforces those, creates those beliefs and reinforces it. But the impact from the people around us and their denial, their minimizing, their avoidance, their outright saying you made it up or whatever, that creates as much difficulty, if not more, for us in our lives than the original thing that created the wound, the original wounding experience. Because it just continually reinforces. And if it's multiple people, then we have these voices of multiple people reinforcing those beliefs as well. It's incredibly damaging to experience that. Lindsay, I don't trust therapists. I've had a lot because I move or they leave, so I don't trust them. I get that too. Um, Leaving, because I've moved a few times or left a job a few times in my work, and I've actually left two private practices, which was incredibly difficult. I left a job that I absolutely loved, and so leaving clients and the job was incredibly difficult. And I know that when you have a therapist that you like, that you feel supported by, that you feel like you trust, and they leave, they're no longer maybe in the agency or whatever, or they move, um, it can bring up a lot. It can bring up a lot of abandonment. It can bring up the idea that it's not safe to trust. And that's important to talk about in therapy. It's important to talk about, hopefully, you have a chance to talk about that with a therapist who is leaving. And it's important to talk about that with a new therapist as well, to process all that that brings up, because it is a loss. It is absolutely a loss. And I think the video I just did most recently, I talked about even when therapy ends because it's time for it to end, it brings up loss. But absolutely, it creates a lot of difficulty with abandonment and trust. And that's something to talk about as well, because you can get through that. You can, it can still hurt because loss is painful, but you can work through that in a healthy way that doesn't leave you with the idea that it is not safe to trust. There's a quote that I love that kind of relates to this, and that it's by Dr. Seuss. And it's, "Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened." Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Now, I think it's important to cry because it's over. I do think we need to create space for that. But if we can also honor what good came from it, then we can do both. We can honor the loss because it's over, and we can feel the blessing or the gratitude, the connection from the fact that it happened. Um, Great question, Allison. If denial and dissociation makes a person feel better, what makes it wrong? I understand you're saying needs are not getting met, but even working through things, not all needs are met always. Let me take the last part of that first. So, there are going to be times in our lives, even when we're healthy or whatever, that our needs are not met. The difference is when you are in a healthy place or in a healthy relationship and needs are not met, you're not taking it personally that your needs are not met. You're not taking it as proof that you're undeserving of your needs being met. You're not coping with the difficulty, the pain of your needs not being met in an unhealthy way. When you have healed, when you've done the work of healing and your needs are not being met, you can find an alternative way, a healthy alternative way of those needs being met. Or you can, maybe it's a different person, or maybe you can say, this is what I really want right now, but I know that that can't happen and it sucks, but I know that it's not because I'm not worthy of it. So let me reach out to this person instead. Or instead of having somebody that I can share this with right now, maybe instead I'll go connect with this friend or in this place where I can distract in a really healthy way. So it's not that your needs are always going to be met, but your needs not being met won't have the same impact on you. So denial and dissociation can make you feel, so you say makes a person feel better. What makes it wrong? I would actually maybe say that I don't know that it necessarily actually makes you feel better overall. Now, it may make you feel better in the sense that you've created this wall so you're not dealing with it. But better from a like a good or healthy perspective is not necessarily the case. Better from the sense of being numb or distracted, yeah. But that's temporary, because eventually, right? Eventually you're not going to be able to hold it back anymore. So, and when you're doing that, going back to the second part of your question, when you're doing that, your needs are not being met. Your need of connection, your need of being heard, of believing in yourself, your need to believe that you are worthy or deserving of the things that you want to create in your life, those needs are not being met. So none of your needs are actually really being met, even if you can exist. And there is definitely a difference between existing and living. And I existed up until I was healing, and certainly on the other side of healing, I existed. Did I have moments when I laughed? Did I have moments when I felt better? Of course. But they were short-lived. I existed. So hopefully that makes sense. Also, everyone has an opinion, and it's hard to decide what's right or wrong to do. You're right, Allison, absolutely. And this is where, so first of all, when it comes to this kind of stuff, I would say you're likely going to be much better off if you are considering opinions of people who are trained and qualified in mental health, in a psychology arena. But even in that realm, there are going to be people who have a difference of opinion. So what I would say about that is what resonates. What in your gut, what feels like it makes more sense for you. And that's hard because when you haven't yet healed, we don't trust our intuition. Survival fear often feels like our intuition telling us it's not safe. That's not necessarily our intuition, it's our automatic survival mechanism. But it's hard to differentiate between the two, and I still struggle with that at times. But ultimately, who do you listen to? And again, I would say if somebody doesn't have the education, the training, the clinical experience, then I would encourage you to listen to these people first. um, but again, if there's a difference of opinion, what where do you feel most at home? Where do you feel when you're listening? What feels most honoring to you? What do you relate to most? And not from a place of fear, but a place that, when I said feels like home, like a place that maybe you find that you're able to fully exhale. Maybe you feel like, oh, I get it. Or, oh, they get it. That's what you honor. That's the voice to listen to. And I fully understand that may not be my voice. And maybe my voice, maybe my perspective isn't what you need right now. And I'm saying this generally, not necessarily to this person. Maybe what I'm saying isn't what you need right now. But that's how we resonate. And I will say that, people have said over the years in watching the videos, or even clients that I've had, that like when they say that, like I say something in a way that they've not heard before, that it feels different or whatever, that's kind of what I'm talking about. And maybe you get that somewhere else, but like where you feel like the person is speaking to you. I think that's what you trust. And then if you go that route, but something isn't feeling quite right, then honor that. And what you need right now may look different than what you needed a year ago, or what you need a year from now, or 5 years ago, or 5 years from now. And I think that's true often for a lot of people. So honor that. And thank you for bringing that. I think that is an important thing. Sharia, absolutely. Absolutely. The more that we are able to talk about stuff, the more that we're able to stand in our truth, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be about abuse. It can be just recognizing that, yeah, I struggle with this, or yeah, I've coped in this way, or whatever it is. The more that people can talk about that, even among friends, I'm not saying you have to create a YouTube channel, but the more that we can even have conversations with our friends or our loved ones, the bigger that becomes, the more that we're able to talk about it. If you think about Brene Brown, right? So she did this TED Talk, and everybody, like tons of people have seen that. Well, since people have seen that, more and more people are comfortable talking about shame and vulnerability, which I am grateful for. Incredibly grateful for. But yes, the more that we are able to share, even with just a close friend, the more conversations are created, and the more conversations are created. And that's ultimately what will change society. It's ultimately what will eliminate the shame that survivors experience when they've been abused and assaulted, and the stigma. Absolutely, that is what will happen. This is a really difficult one. How do you not give up and believe people when they look at you and say it's your fault that you were raped, or that someone committed suicide? So again, I'm going to say this again. How do you not give up? You have the support of a professional. Like, honestly, I wish that I could say that there's something you could do on your own that is really going to help you get through that. But having somebody say that to you is incredibly damaging and destructive, and so profoundly reinforces the beliefs that we're already holding on to, the really incredibly damaging beliefs that we're already holding on to. So we need the support and the understanding of a professional that can help us navigate that. Because if we deal with it on our own, or even if we have a really, really great book that we read, our own belief system, our own core belief about that, the voice that we've heard say it is going to carry much more weight than what we're trying to learn in this book or watching a video. We need ongoing, continued support in that situation. And I can absolutely tell you, and I know this isn't going to shift anything magically for you, but never is it anybody's fault that they were raped, and never is it anybody's fault. It cannot be anybody's fault that somebody chose to take their life other than the person who made that choice. Never is it somebody else's fault. And people will say that to you because they've got a whole lot of their own healing to do themselves. Marion, yes, you could do that too. And I am absolutely on board with that. Is it important to pick someone at their emotional age in therapy? I'm not sure what you mean by this, Marion. So the idea, like, as a client, maybe you would say, like, somebody might say to you, well, you're 20 now, so don't act like a kid, or don't go into those immature kinds of places. The reality is, when you're working on healing, it's incredibly vulnerable, and you will go into those more immature places. You will go into the felt experience. You will go into the age that you were when you were most wounded. That's going to happen. And that's part of the whole, like, going back to the borderline personality disorder thing. That is part of what happens, is you respond to the difficulties emotionally from a place that you were when you were most wounded. And this is true for all of us, no matter what our wounding is. Which is why when we go back to our family of origin, it's like we're all kids again with our siblings, and problems happen. But there's times that's going to kind of happen to a certain extent, and times when it's not going to happen. So there's nothing really inherently wrong with that happening. Mary, it sounds like I don't know what the exact circumstances are, but you said you want to do it your way. The reality is, even for me as a therapist, and in all the years I've had as a therapist, if I'm really struggling with something, and again, I'm on the other side of healing, so this would be even more true if I wasn't. But even now, if I'm really struggling with something, I can't get through it completely on my own if something is kind of triggered that I'm unaware of. Because if I'm in my own head about it, then all those core beliefs, or all those other things are clouding my ability to see it for what it really is. So certainly, if we haven't had the ability to heal yet, there's no way we can do this on our own. I absolutely believe that we cannot do this on our own. In part, again, because of the being wounded in our relationship, we need a healing relationship in order to be able to heal. Lenny, I'm glad that the videos have been helpful on your journey here. And thank you for watching. Thank you, Barbara. I really believe the right methods and tools with clinical guidance is needed for optimal healing, to free the soul to love and live our potential without fear. Absolutely. Very concise way of saying it all. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yes, and it is about having all these other resources or tools that we need because um, we do need that. And even for me, even though I incorporate all these other pieces of healing, I will often encourage people to do some other things as well, like doing things on their own and like sound healing. I incorporated a sound healing in a retreat one year, um, and it was incredible. And I've talked about sound healing at different times, and a lot of people use sound healing, and that's not something that I actually do. So oftentimes I will suggest sound healing. I am relatively new to Reiki healing, so I have people that do Reiki treatments in person, and I can do it long distance, but I like people often to do it in person. There are all different kinds. Equine therapy, like there are different things that I will often suggest to people that they do if they have an interest in doing it to help them with it. So I'm not suggesting that that I alone um, can heal somebody. It is a combination of different things, and in saying that, what I'm suggesting is that there isn't any one thing that can heal us. There just isn't. Um, so I think I've addressed everything here. Um, and I know finding the right therapist can be challenging. And I've said this before, even a really, really great therapist, like maybe you know, not that there's a lot of reviews necessarily for therapists, but maybe you've read tons of testimonials about how great that therapist is. The reality is that even if that is an incredible therapist, it may not be the right therapist for you. It can take sometimes several tries before you find the right person. And again, the person who's right for you now may not be the right person for you down the road. Or who was right for you a while may not be the person who's right for you now. Now, it could be. There are a lot of people who will go back to the same therapist over a decade or more. And if that works for you and that feels good to you and you feel like you're gaining from it, then that's great. That's beautiful. But it may not be the case, and that's okay. Maybe the therapist moves, maybe you move, maybe that person's no longer in practice, any number of things. Um, but sometimes having a new therapist isn't necessarily, doesn't have to be a bad thing. But know that it can take sometimes a few tries. I've shared this before, but back in, I don't know, it was maybe around the time that I started my own practice. So maybe like in 2007-ish or so, I looked for a therapist because there was a big change in my life. I was moving out of working in rape crisis and I was starting my own practice, and we had just recently moved away from a job that I absolutely loved in rape crisis, and the people that I worked with, and my kids were off kind of on their own, and my son had a medical thing come up, and so there was a lot going on in my life. And I just decided to go to therapy because I felt like I wanted support. And I went to, gosh, I don't know. I think I tried a few different people. And one, so I had been a therapist at this point for quite some time, 6-ish years maybe. But I went to one and I spoke to her ahead of time and it seemed good. but I went to her, and at the end, she, um, I don't know, I think maybe, I don't know if I went to shake her hand or maybe I didn't go to do anything. And she said, "Oh, I'm a hugger." And she grabbed me and hugged me. And while it didn't like trigger me or anything like that, I just thought, that's not really appropriate. She knew my history. Yeah, she knew I was a therapist as well, um, but I just thought, to me, that was like somebody who isn't aware of other people's boundaries. So now she may be a great therapist. In a lot of ways, she may have been a really great therapist. She may have helped a lot of people over the years. But to me, that was a boundary issue. I love hugs. I love hugs. And I didn't mind her hugging me specifically. It just didn't feel like that was an appropriate thing for her to do, on my very first session, especially. Um, and then I went to somebody who, um, their their office was in their home, which was perfectly okay. I had actually considered having my office in my home as well. This experience made me realize that wasn't a good idea. but um, I had my session, and I don't remember exactly. I feel like I like there's a sign, and I had to maybe wait outside or something because she's scheduled to where the clients kind of would overlap. So her client, she was in with a client while I when I got there, and then her client left, and I think I had to wait outside. And then in the session, her cat was in there, and she didn't ask me if I was allergic. At least not before I made the session. Well, not before I set the appointment. She didn't. She may have when I got in there. Um, so her cat was in there, um, and she. I didn't. Her. I didn't mind her specifically as a therapist, but again, it just felt weird to me. I thought it was weird that I had to wait outside. Um, and I'm not talking about I got there 15 minutes early and had to wait 10 minutes outside, or even 14 minutes outside, or 15 minutes outside. I think she was late. And then has a cat. So anyway, um, just didn't sit well with me. She seemed like a decent therapist. Um, but those other things made me feel like, okay, I don't think this is the right person for me. So I moved on. And I think I actually quit looking for somebody at that point. And I don't know, maybe months later or something, decided to look for somebody again. And maybe I wasn't even really looking. I think somehow I might have come across this person somewhat just organically. And she ended up being a very different kind of therapist, which was interesting. So I ended up going to her for a while, and I liked her. So even for me, knowing what questions to ask ahead of time, I did learn. Um, well, I wouldn't have actually necessarily asked, but it made me kind of learn a few things about client experiences and everything. But it's just kind of an example that sometimes it can take a little while, that we need to trust ourselves. If something doesn't feel right, no matter what the reason, it's okay to move on. We don't have to talk ourselves into it. We don't have to make excuses for something, because I could have said with that woman, the first woman that gave me a hug, I could have said, "Oh, isn't that really nice that she wanted to give me a hug?" And maybe the hug even felt good. So I shouldn't have felt uncomfortable. No, if it doesn't feel comfortable, if it feels awkward, if it causes you to doubt yourself in some way, if it made you feel weird in some way, then honor that. And again, it doesn't have to mean that she was a bad therapist or that she did anything wrong necessarily. Though most people in the trauma field would say that's a big no-no. Um, that's it didn't sit well with me. So you sometimes have to keep trying. Um, and that's okay. And I will say to people, especially when I had my private practice, that um, whether it was our first phone call or even our first session, if it doesn't feel okay, that's all right. You don't even owe me an explanation. That it's okay if it's not the right fit. And if a therapist is healthy, then they're not going to take that personally. So I know that's something a lot of people fear as well, that they're going to hurt the therapist's feelings. If your therapist is hurt by that, then they maybe shouldn't be doing therapy, or they just need to do their own healing, I guess I should say. Doesn't mean they shouldn't be doing therapy necessarily, but they should definitely do some of their own healing. So it may take you a little while. And again, this is part of the reason why I suggest starting with a rape crisis center. Really, rape crisis centers, and again, obviously, they're all going to be a little different, so I can't guarantee what your local rape crisis center is going to be. But the most beautiful place that I ever worked, the most beautiful people that I ever worked with were in a rape crisis center. The people who I felt that their work really mattered to them and they were in it for the work was in rape crisis centers. That's not a negative about people in private practice. I ended up having my own private practice. I know that people have this idea that rape crisis centers are somehow not good or whatever. And that's another myth that I want to bust. People think that, well, if I'm not paying for it, then it's not really that valuable. Absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. So, and I know that there are communities where you just don't have a rape crisis center close to you. I know there are countries where rape crisis centers maybe don't exist at all. Or if they do, there's like a few in the entire country. And I am deeply sorry if that is the case. That's really incredibly unfortunate. And that certainly creates a huge challenge for finding somebody that is going to be able to work well with you. Because my guess is if there's not a lot of rape crisis centers or no rape crisis center, then there's probably not a lot of emphasis or training on working with survivors of sexual trauma. So in that case, keep reading, keep watching until you're able to find something. And if that is the case, again, and it doesn't have to be my course, there may be some other courses out there, but participating in a lower cost option might be a group. Like if you can't financially afford it, then something that is more financially affordable, like Journey to Wholeness, or again, maybe there's something else out there that exists with somebody who's trained and experienced. But like Journey to Wholeness might be an option because it's a much lower price point than working with me individually. And you get a lot of healing that can happen inside the group. Again, you're going to need more than just the group, but it can be a beautiful healing opportunity to experience in there. So I will share when I'm done here. Actually, I might be able to share this now. Actually, you know what? I'm going to share it in the description when this is over because I can go back and edit the description. So in the description, once this is over, I will go back and add the link for Journey to Wholeness. It is not too late to join, to participate in the group or even the live Q&As. If you purchase today or tomorrow, you'll have to send me a separate email. If you purchase today or tomorrow Journey to Wholeness, it will not be too late for you to jump in and for me to get you access to the first 2 lessons so that you can participate live in the Q&A for lesson 2. I realize that might be really confusing, and I apologize because when you sign up, you get a new lesson every 2 weeks. But I'm doing the second Q&A, the live Q&A, on next Friday. So if you hop in today or tomorrow, you'll get immediate access to lesson 1, and you can watch the replay of the Q&A inside the group, and send me an email. And I'm almost positive that I can make it so that you can get access to lesson 2 a week from when you sign up, and then each subsequent lesson you'll get every 2 weeks, which should get you caught up so to participate in real time inside Journey to Wholeness. So, if you've thought about joining Journey to Wholeness, if you are interested in Journey to Wholeness and wondering what it is, I will share the link in the description when I am done here. Actually, let me go ahead and see if I can share it here as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share it now at 1 minute or 1 hour, 50 minutes in. So there's the link if you're interested in learning more about Journey to Wholeness. And then I will also share it in the description if you're watching this on replay and you have no idea where anything is. Okay, let me go back through here, put my glasses back on, see if I've missed anything. I'm glad it's been helpful, Jody. So Wendy, this is a really great question. And this is part of the significant struggle that people have. It's kind of like the catch-22 or dilemma that people are faced with. Asking for help, seeking professional support is incredibly vulnerable. I call my practice, my business, Courageous Journeys for a reason. I truly believe that when you've been wounded in childhood, seeking professional help, acknowledging that there's something there to heal, I truly believe is about the most courageous thing that anybody can ever do because it's incredibly vulnerable. So, how do you trust other people? The reality is, you trust other people by putting your trust in the right people. So, and I know that might sound absolutely ridiculous, but the only way that you can learn to trust somebody is to risk putting your trust in somebody and not having that trust betrayed. That is the reality. That is the only way that you can learn to fully trust people again. It is. There is no other way. Or I guess maybe if there is something out there, I don't know what that would be. But we don't trust because we've been hurt. And if we've been hurt, it's been that we've been hurt by somebody. So the only way that we can really learn to trust again is by trusting somebody. So in working with a professional, and again, sometimes that professional that you're working with is the only person in your life that you might share anything with. And that's okay, at least for quite some time, that's okay. But when you put your trust, and it's incremental, right? You don't immediately just suddenly fully trust somebody. It's incremental. You trust them with being present with you in a session. You trust them with keeping your information private. You trust them with hearing your story. You trust them with, like, if they say, like, if you call them and leave a message and they let you know that they'll call you back or whatever, and you leave them a message to call you back, and you trust that they're going to call you back, and then they call you back. So that builds some of that trust. It's incremental. Every little opportunity gets you to the place where you can trust. And, as Lindsay said earlier, she struggles with trust because, like, a therapist has moved or she's moved or something like that. And that does create those difficulties because of the sense of abandonment or being betrayed even though a therapist moving is not a betrayal, never would that be a betrayal. It doesn't change the reality that it feels that way. And that's ultimately what matters in terms of the impact that it has. But We can only fully learn to trust or to feel a sense of trust with people when we risk trusting somebody. And that's one of the reasons why working with a therapist is important. It's also one of the reasons why group work is so important. And whether it's an in-person group or something like Journey to Wholeness, because a therapist is important and helpful, and you can learn to build trust. But when you are in a group environment, again, a group environment that is facilitated ideally by somebody that you kind of trust, that there are some that it's actually a what's the word I'm looking for? It's the group is actually created for healing, I guess I would say. When you show up in that type of circumstance, you are automatically putting trust in other people there. And if it is a healing type group, then you get to experience in different ways from different people opportunities to build that trust. Lots of little opportunities, sometimes a bigger opportunity, but you get to have lots of experiences to build that trust. So I know that might seem a little counterintuitive. It might also feel incredibly frustrating or overwhelming that you have to trust somebody before you can actually feel safe enough to trust somebody. But again, that's part of the reason why finding somebody that you feel understood, or who you feel understands you, I guess, where you feel just energetically, where it feels like a safe space for you. And then it grows over time. Oh, Marian, absolutely not. Is it lean back and let the therapist do their work? Absolutely not. Am I saying that at all? You as a client are doing the work. You're doing the work. The therapist is the guide. The therapist is the one that can hold hope when you can't. The therapist is the one that reminds you of the things that you need to be reminded of when you can't see it. But the work is you. It is absolutely you. In fact, the therapist cannot do the work for you at all. And in fact, much of the healing happens because you are doing the work. So you get to see yourself and experience yourself differently. I'm not. I don't disagree that therapists are not always right. Absolutely, you're absolutely right. But it's a partnership. It's not the therapist doing it for you. It's not the therapist telling you. If I encourage somebody to do something that I think is going to be helpful for them, if it doesn't feel right to them, and I have conversations with clients about this, then I want them to tell me that. If something, like in the group the other day, yesterday maybe, I don't know, I created a post and created a challenge for people to do something, to try something. I think it's a powerful exercise. I think it's a deep exercise, but it's a challenging exercise, which is why I call it a challenge. But it can be a really challenging exercise, and it can actually bring up a lot. And so I recognized that afterwards, and I went back in and I said, let me create a second option here. And so I created a second option for that. So you have to just because a therapist may know more or may know exactly what is likely going to help you, of course you need to honor what is right for you. But a therapist is not putting you on their back and carrying you up that mountain. The therapist is just letting you know that there is a path to that mountain. A therapist is there to help fight off those bears when they approach. A therapist is there to massage your feet after a long day's trek. A therapist is there because none of us can get up that mountain alone. I would never try to suggest that a therapist has the magic power or is the sole like just has all the answers, and they're imparting their wisdom on you, and that's what gets you up the mountain. Not at all. They are the guide that helps you see and understand things that you are not yet able to see or understand, because we are looking at our lives from those core beliefs. Because the core beliefs they become instinctual. What they make us think and how they make us behave is instinctual. It's survival. It stems from the survival mechanism that kicks in. So the therapist, because they understand all of this, not just because they went to school, that's why I say somebody who really understands, they can help you see beyond that. Yeah, professional boundaries. And I would say, generally speaking, by far, way by far, most therapists have pretty good professional boundaries. And I would say, even as time has gone on, I think that this is something that is more necessary. And I think, personally, I believe that anybody who is doing this work, whether it's as a coach or a therapist, should have gone through their own therapy. I do believe that, because we are all wounded and we need to understand what those wounds are and how they show up in our lives. So, and that's a question you can ask your therapist. You can absolutely ask your therapist if they've had their therapy themselves. And if they don't want to answer it, or if they say no, I would actually encourage you to seriously consider finding somebody else. And I might piss a lot of therapists off by saying that, but that is the reality. And the reality is, in the US, and again, this is general, states might do it differently, programs might do it differently, but in the US, you can be a therapist in private practice without having had your own therapy, which I think is a little unfortunate, but there's some privacy issues, I guess, is why they don't all do that. But it is a question you can ask. You can always donate at a rape crisis center. I'm not, Barbara, if you're still on here, I'm not sure what that's referring to. Maybe somebody said something. Yes, please donate at a rape crisis center. Because they are typically, in the US anyway, especially right now, they've lost a lot of their government funding because of the Violence Against Women Act has not been reauthorized. So donating to a rape crisis center, I think, is if you like to donate, whether it's financial, like actual money, or things, to a charity or to a nonprofit, a rape crisis center is great. I actually have, for those of you who shop on Amazon, I don't know if this is an international Amazon thing or just in the US, but you can shop through Amazon Smile and pick a charity, and they donate money to that charity that you pick. My Amazon Smile is actually to the rape crisis center that I was both a client at and where I worked. I set that up a while ago, and that's where I always have it go to because they helped me in my personal life as a client. It was such that was the beginning of my healing and the most profound piece of my healing in terms of professional support. And it is where I got my start, specifically working with survivors of assault and abuse. So, absolutely, I agree with Barbara. Pay a fee as well as receive funding. Yeah. And some rape crisis centers do charge a fee. Generally, it's not a very high fee. Sometimes it's based on income. Sometimes it's just a flat, smaller fee. Sometimes it's a bigger fee if you have the resources to do that. And some of them are free. Where I worked, nobody paid for our services, whether it was advocacy or counseling or groups. No matter how much money you had, you didn't pay. Um, Marianne, I'm not sure if it was my answer or somebody else's answer, but I'm glad that you feel like you got a great answer. So I've started talking to a therapist because of the last Q&A. Yay! Oh, I love that. Ah, it's gonna make me cry, Wendy. I am so, so, so happy for you. So happy for you. Really, uh, I'm so glad that you're getting the support that you need and that you deserve. And I'm so glad that you took that step. It's going to be challenging, no doubt about it, but you can get there. You absolutely can get there. Um, yes, Lenny, thank you. All right, everybody. So we have been on here. I have been on here for over 2 hours, and I actually have another meeting coming up very shortly. So if you're watching this on replay, again, I know it's kind of a long one. So thank you for being here. For those of you live, I so appreciate your energy as we share this space together live. And I absolutely appreciate all of your questions and just really your energy in being here. You know, I talked about the help or the benefit in healing and trusting and all of that in a group setting. This actually is kind of that, on a little bit of a different level, but you know, I don't know what I was saying right now. There's 14 people on here. I think it was higher at one point, but there's quite a few different people commenting and sharing here. These are people that you probably don't know in your real life, but you're trusting. You're taking a risk in sharing yourself and connecting with me, and maybe even connecting with other people here. So you're experiencing on some level an aspect of trust, trusting yourself and trusting others. So even just being here and sharing yourself and sharing your energy is hopefully helpful to you, obviously, but it is helpful to other people too. It absolutely is helpful to other people too. So thank you all for being here. I truly appreciate it. I truly appreciate you. I appreciate your inspiring words for me to do more. I do appreciate that. That means a lot. And I feel it. I feel that energy. I may end up having to hire like a ghostwriter or something to actually get it done, but I want to do that. And maybe even collaborate. I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I truly appreciate your words of inspiration of getting there. So thank you. Oh, that's interesting, Benji. Thank you for sharing that. So your experience, your actual lived experience in terms of kind of having both of those pieces of understanding, the metaphysical and the psychological, is helpful for me to understand where you're coming from, like what your experience is, and what some of the like challenges that you might notice coming up from the more like psychological or science space might be, so that I can better understand how to speak about it in a way that is maybe easier to understand or take in, because I know that I can be very kind of concrete sometimes, kind of direct, kind of um, serious. I don't know. Um, and that can feel like a heavy energy sometimes, if not much of the time. I know that that the energy of that can feel kind of heavy, which for a lot of people, and I have friends like this, for people that are kind of more in that high vibe kind of thing, can be a detractor, can kind of cause people to energetically want to move the other direction. So thank you for sharing that. And really, I anything that you'd like to share, any like things that you've noticed feeling like a challenge for you, or kind of like, yeah, I don't know about that or whatever. I'd actually really love to hear that from you, so that I can understand that from a better perspective, because hearing it from somebody who is specifically a survivor of abuse will definitely help me have a better understanding of that. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you being here. Wendy, it's okay if you haven't been able to open up yet. That's perfectly okay. It is important to feel like you can build a sense of trust before you jump into some of that really heavy stuff, I think, because and this has happened with clients of mine, I have no doubt. Sometimes people will come to therapy and jump in and share all kinds of stuff, which by itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. But what will often happen is you will end up feeling completely overwhelmed and ashamed. You'll feel terrified that you shared too much, that the therapist is going to judge you, that they're going to think that you're crazy, that they're not going to want to work with you, like all kinds of stuff. Um, and that can create problems. And when that happens, very, very often, a client won't go back. So, and that's obviously not a good thing. So it's perfectly okay and perfectly reasonable that you're not going to share everything up front. What I would encourage you to maybe share, especially if the person, well, I guess maybe not especially, but whether the person understands a lot about trauma or not, if it feels okay to you, you might consider letting the person know that you have a history of childhood trauma, or you have a history of rape, or whatever, however you want to say it, that you have this history that you know has impacted you, but you're not yet ready to talk about it. And that's perfectly reasonable to do. And it might be helpful to do that just so that as things unfold with your therapist, without you having to go into any detail or even the extent of what your experience is, your therapist will have an understanding of your struggles, your symptoms, whatever is going on, that you are sharing. Your therapist will have in the background this understanding that, okay, so some of this is likely related to all of this other stuff. Instead of thinking, okay, so this person is struggling with these things, what can I do to fix it? Or what can I look up to manage these symptoms, or whatever? And I'm not saying that's what a therapist would actually do, but if they don't know, if they think that you're struggling with these symptoms just because of general life stuff, then the suggestions or what they're going to share with you are going to be quite different, likely, than if they know that you have this other stuff that's in the background here. Without having to necessarily know much at all about it, just knowing that they have it. And that's really, really beneficial information for that person to have. If you don't feel comfortable sharing it, that's okay. You don't necessarily have to do it right now. But once you're at least maybe 2 or 3 months in, ideally you might be able to share at least that you have this history, even if you don't want to share it. Because that will really be able to make a pretty significant difference, generally speaking. You're welcome, Barbara. You're welcome, Lindsay. Yes, take your time. Not sure. You're welcome, Marianne. I'm not sure what you're asking about. Ideas for what, Wendy? Thank you, Lenny. You have a great day too. Hi, Herlinda. Erlinda. I'm actually not sure how you pronounce that. Um, yeah, grounding is absolutely important. Somatic experiencing is one of the tools that can be really helpful in releasing the energetic, the physiological aspect of how we hold on to trauma. Absolutely true. And something I'm wholehearted, yeah, a yes to. Yeah. All right. So thank you everybody for being here. I really, really appreciate you all. And I want to try to find a way to maybe incorporate some lives regularly aside from inside Journey to Wholeness. But if you are interested in Journey to Wholeness, I'm showing up there doing different things quite frequently, and at least every couple of weeks, having the live Q and A's as well. So again, I will share that link in the description of this video afterwards. So have a beautiful rest of your day or evening, wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you next time.